Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, desolators, peasants, vassals, minions. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today we're going to talk about the Russian mass surveillance system. And this is a topic I wanted to look at because I did a little investigating after seeing the Edward Snowden in the forum with Vladimir Putin, asking him directly about what kind of surveillance, mass surveillance program they had in Russia. And for the most part, Vladimir Putin, as a consummate politician, walked that fine line between lying and telling the truth. And what he said was interesting, and what he left out was essential. And so anyway, it was an interesting question to ask. So I got two articles. One of them is very extensive, and I didn't use that as a source so much for this video. But for those who want to know more in depth about the Russian surveillance state, it's a great article, and I attach it below. But the other article is the one I came across first, and it just talks about the high points, comparing about the systems of the NSA and then the system that's being used in Russia. And so now we have the Russian security service called the FSB, or the Federal Security Service. And they have a system called the, quote, System for Operative Investigative Activities, unquote, or SORM. And they've been using this program since 1990. And so that's very comparable to what we have in the United States. We have both the FBI and the NSA and other intelligence agencies commandeering systems that are for collection of data. So that's very comparable. And it's these SORM systems. There's 3 or 4 different components that have to do with calls, emails, website visits, credit card transactions. And the systems collect, store, analyze all this data. And they collect both metadata and content and store this data for 3 years. So that all of that is also extremely comparable to what we have in the United States. All the metadata is collected, all the content is collected, calls, emails, website visits, credit card transactions. The one difference being that, for the most part, the Russian surveillance system is focusing in on Russia. And as we now know, the NSA is a global dragnet. And even though we have the NSA focusing an amazing amount of technology on the domestic population, the fact is that the NSA system is a global dragnet. And undoubtedly, Russia has its own access to international espionage and able to get a fair amount of its own international calls, emails, and website visits and the like. For the most part, that is one difference. And so that bespeaks volumes about the American empire and its global reach with its international global surveillance system. And then we also have a Russian law that requires a device that the company itself is, the technology companies themselves are required to pay for this device and the cost of its installation. But after that, the government has full access without having to collaborate with the technology companies. And that's also pretty similar to what we have here in the United States, although the corporations and technology companies and the government have all been in collusion here to develop these systems, develop the technology, and certainly have dual access. But it's also interesting in the United States in law, written into law, that the technology companies had to give government access to their technology, and in many instances were required by law to construct backdoor technology and access technology for intelligence communities for these private corporations. And then we also have a collection of the data in Russia requires a court order, but these are secret and not shown to the service provider. And certainly there's a lot of parallels here in the United States to that same system. The FISA system is supposedly having to get court orders. But as we find out since, this system has been almost entirely circumvented. So in that sense, it's nearly identical to the Russian system. and they certainly don't necessarily have to show it to the service provider, although in the United States we have a lot of corporate records of how many requests they get from the government for a lot of access, but certainly not all of it. And then in Russia in 2012, we had 540,000 intercepts of phone and internet traffic that were authorized. So that's authorized, 540,000. So that's a pretty sizable amount. That's probably comparable to the U.S. If anyone has better figures on that, please include them in the comments. But the key here is, of course, authorized. The amount that they actually listened to and collected could be a huge amount, maybe everyone in Russia, much like here in the United States. So that's pretty comparable as well. And then we have 7 other Russian agencies, intelligence agencies, that have access to the same information and system. And we know that also works the same way in the United States. We have the CIA, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, NSA, all these different agencies all sharing the same information, sharing these same systems. So that's pretty much the same. And then we also have, incidentally, SORM is routinely used against political opponents and activists in Russia. And as we now know and have always known, all the government agencies in the United States are also used by governments to stifle their opponents, and it's also used on a party level. But the interesting thing is in Russia is that the Russian courts have actually upheld the legality of using these surveillance systems in Russia in order to go against your political opponents and activists. And for the most part, that's the way the system here works, in spite of the best efforts to regulate it. So there we have a quick overview of what we now know more about this Russian surveillance state, very comparable to the surveillance state that we have in the United States. Only Russia seems to focus more just on Russia, and the United States focuses a lot on the USA, but has a global dragnet as well. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.